All right, guys, I'm going to start just talking now about. I think this is kind of the most versatile and useful topic for us here when we're thinking about cannabis and CBD and using it in our practice. We're not so used to it yet. I do think that this is going to be really useful for a lot of people here. We did a lot of talks already that were really helpful. We did one on like 101s and using it in the acute setting, and then the last one we did today was on legality. So if you guys have any questions about that stuff prior to right now, then don't hesitate to come up and either ask me or the team afterwards. So, yeah. So this topic, though, our last one, is really quite useful for people, like I said, because of the fact that, even though I personally know very confidently that all of us can use a properly vetted CBD product in practice when it's made sure to have the safety side of it double checked. Still, a lot of people are very hesitant and nervous about it and not really sure what they can and cannot do. So starting off and using it topically for the innumerable amount of conditions we see and patients we see is an amazing way to start to slowly integrate it and get comfortable with it in practice, because you're not actually putting something down the animal's mouth, which is where I just find a lot of people that are in the veterinary side a little bit less comfortable with starting out. So this is a really great way to almost kind of ease yourself into applying cannabis and a full spectrum hemp product in practice in a comfortable way. And at the same time, as we know, pet parents come to us for the reasons of mostly what they can see, with skin conditions and ear conditions being, on the top of that list. So two very good reasons why this talk can be really, I think, applicable to everyone, especially, like I said, if we're not already using a full spectrum hemp product in practice on a regular basis. All right, so just to start off, I always like to start at the basis of everything. And basically what that means is that why are we even talking about CBD and cannabis for pets and for humans for treating a variety of conditions, is because we all share the exact same endocannabinoid system. And obviously the development of that and the extensiveness and maybe the distribution throughout the body is going to be slightly different, but across species. But at the end of the day, there's this broad system throughout every animal in the animal kingdom except for arthropods that is able to react and respond favorably to a cannabis-based product when the body's in need of coming back to homeostasis. And so, but again, just like any other system, even though we weren't taught about it like from the beginning, like your cardiovascular system and your nervous system, it still follows the same principles, in meaning that it has a compilation of ligands, receptors, and then enzymes that help control the concentration of the amount of molecules that are floating around in the body. And so, knowing this, cannabis has almost this cloud around it all the time, but at the end of the day, it's just another system in your body, but it is 100% the most important system for the fact that it is regulating every other system's functioning every second of every day, and is helping to keep the body in homeostasis as best as possible. Homeostasis, again, this word is just so applicable in so many ways, because what we're doing as practitioners is we are trying to always bring animals back to normalcy. And so homeostasis is the basis of why we're even going to work every day. And so, if there's a system that is working with us and in conjunction with us to help our bodies remain at equilibrium, then, at least it seems logical that we would maybe put that at the forefront, even though we're, it's relatively new to all of us, that we maybe want to put that at the forefront of saying maybe this is important for us to include in a multimodal therapy plan, regardless of what we're dealing with. Obviously, given the fact, like I said, that the endocannabinoid system is found in some level or concentration in every single system in the body that we would be treating otherwise. So that, and then what does that mean? So that the skin is not any different than that. And again, the skin is our biggest organ we have in our body. So the applicability of using a cannabis-based product for treating the variety of skin conditions and ear conditions and other things that are attached to that, anal gland conditions, all this stuff has the ability to be lapsed into and incorporated into the discussion of cannabis-based therapies, and in the discussion of the endocannabinoid system either needing help or doing its job. And so there's been numerous studies and papers on the human side, and we do have one or two international papers on the vet side now that help to prove the fact that the endocannabinoid system is very vibrant and is very dense within the skin. And so the skin has multiple layers and multiple subtypes in it, but you can find both CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors at different variations and different ratios at all levels of the skin. Thus, it has an amazing opportunity to respond to cannabis-based therapies. And so, like I said, we now have evidence in the veterinary side as well that this is true. So your classic endocannabinoid receptors, and then as some of us may not know, some of us may know, some of us not know, the endocannabinoid system not only is just responding and reacting with its own direct receptors, but has the ability to interplay and interact with a variety of other receptor types throughout the body. In the nervous system, we talk about serotonin and dopamine and glutamate and GABA, but throughout the body as well. In the peripheral tissues, receptors that are included in the TRP family, the PPR family, and the G protein coupled receptor families that are often considered orphan receptors, the endocannabinoid system is also interacting and interplaying with them. And so, as you can see from this little chart here, that within I would say, probably the three species we often see most, unless, we have farm animal docs here, canine, felines, and then equines, we have proof now that they are found at that these receptors are found at certain levels at each site within the body, not just in the, the skin itself, but also the other organs that sit in the skin, such as the sebaceous, sweat glands, mast cells, etc. So again, and what that means also as well is that then if there's receptors there, then the endocannabinoids themselves, the molecules your body is making to try and respond to those, is also being created. And so, your classic anandamide and 2-AG, which are your endocannabinoids that everyone talks about mostly, those are found in a high concentration there, depending on if there's disease going on or if the body is okay in that site. But at the same time, there are also, which is really not talked about at all, there are also numerous other molecules that are non-endocannabinoid but similar in structure and function, that the skin is an organ that has an extremely high ability to respond to these other molecules that exist in your body and that actually now can be given in a nutraceutical form, which we'll get into a little bit. But the main one, which has gotten a ton of support through research actually on the human side with autoimmune and immune-mediated conditions for the skin, is a molecule called palmitoyl ethanolamide, which actually there is a product on the veterinary side that has it in there, but I don't really know anyone that's using it, and I only came across it recently. But there is a pet product that has it in there, but on the human side, it's very well known through people that, through actually conventional docs as well as people that may have an integrative background, that PEA is useful for lots of ways to address inflammation in the skin, whether it's infectious-based or non-infectious inflammatory-based. So like I said, there's other molecules here that have different acronyms, but I really think, along with CBD and the other major and minor cannabinoids, that PEA should be considered in this conversation when we're talking about the skin, for the fact that we have a large volume of research to back that up. Cannabis itself, there's always that ignorant attack that there's not enough research to prove it, and et cetera. We know that we have thousands of papers on the cannabis side, but this is just interesting because PEA, which is found in nature as well as, like I said, in supplement form, also has the ability to treat a variety of conditions, with the one in veterinary medicine being most pertinent would be atopic dermatitis, whether that's chronically or within flare-ups, whether it is pyotraumatic dermatitis or hotspots, or there are sites that are getting a little bit more aggravated, whether it's in the spring or fall, etc. So, the ability for this molecule, as well as cannabis itself, to be highly useful for us in the disease that we see the most, honestly, in practice, the skin being the organ that's attacked, then there's no reason at all why we shouldn't be considering this. So, just going to do one or two slides on PEA, because I do think it's something that really no one knows about. Cannabis we kind of talk about. PEA is, I would consider it something we should really be including in our multimodal therapy in addition to cannabis-based therapies. It's a naturally occurring substance that's made from the same parent molecule, the ALA molecules that are actually from the phospholipid bilayer. And so it has the ability to respond not only with skin cells and, like I said, those other mini organs that live in the skin, but also with the immune cells that exist there, such as mast cells, lymphocytes, histiocytes, etc. It doesn't actually bind to CB1 or CB2 receptors directly, but it does stimulate and activate the other variety of receptors that exist and that are interplaying with the endocannabinoid system themselves, which would include your TRP receptors and your PPR receptors. And so, again, like I said, with cannabis, why cannabis is so beautiful is because it has hundreds of thousands of bioactive molecules that have over 6 billion years been able to find a way that it maximizes efficacy and minimizes side effects when it's used in its whole plant form. PEA is a great adjunct to the entourage effect that that colloquial phrase, but really it just encompasses the beauty of cannabis itself, and that PEA can be considered adjunct to that entourage effect. And so, what it all comes down to, again, with cannabis, though, is that it's unless you're dealing with a certain condition, you're dealing with epilepsy or with cancer, well, even cancer itself, exactly, I guess it could be considered as well. But what cannabis is mostly effective at is helping to modulate your immune system and work with your immune system in that both of those are working to keep you in homeostasis. And since the immune system is kind of like the mobile aspect of that homeostasis element, and the endocannabinoid system is almost like that, static component of it, they're always talking and working with each other so that, again, you're trying to keep the body in equilibrium. And so, but specifically then when we're talking about that balance within the epidermis itself and in the dermis, the endocannabinoid system, like I said prior, is very active there. And when, you have your CB1 or CB2 receptors that are activated and engaged, it helps with a variety of measures to help the skin get back to normalcy. And whether that involves in a site that's traumatized or is trying to heal, cell proliferation or differentiation, or in a situation where you're putting it on either a benign or a malignant tumor type, then it can induce apoptosis in the right moment. And so this aspect, time and time again, scares people because it's like, how can it be doing all these things at once? There's no way that it could be this, panacea of treatment options. And it's not really that it's a panacea of treatment options when you take into account that 90% of disease is based in inflammation, and cannabis is helping to modulate the immune system and reduce that inflammation, then it makes sense as to why it's inducing your body to just act more properly. Okay, and then again, like I said, you have, we call them microorgans within the skin itself, but your hair follicle is its own environment, and so the endocannabinoid system, again, with specifically CB1 receptors are higher in density there. It helps to helps with different functions of the hair follicle itself, mostly with hair proliferation, but at the same time, it also can help with inhibiting growth in certain situations as well. And so, I don't really know yet in terms of if it has a direct way in which I could see it being utilized for hair growth or non-growth, but in human side they've been using it a little bit more. But I just like to include this because it just shows that, again, the endocannabinoid receptors in the system itself is there. Another organ that's in there, the sebaceous glands, they are again found, the receptors are found in this side as well. And since your sebaceous glands are actually very heavily involved in human side, more in terms of autoimmune diseases, but in our side it exacerbates a lot of our infectious diseases such as malassezia dermatitis and pyodermas. If you can keep immune modulation at that site, then again it just helps to create a more favorable environment on the skin and then keep that animal in long-term health. And then, lastly, as we know, the nervous system always innervates everything everywhere, whether you're talking about centrally or peripherally. And, again, people always talk about endocannabinoid system within the central nervous system, so that's, where everyone kind of hears and feels about it, whether it's due to, affecting your mood or cognition. But the peripheral nervous system has just as much of an ability to respond and react favorably to cannabis-based therapies, and the endocannabinoid system is present as well. Thus, a local application to a site in the skin can also help with reducing the amount of pain and cytokine storm that exists in a site that's been aggravated or agitated from self-trauma or from infection. And, in addition to that, like I said, our immune system is everywhere, helping to talk and crosstalk. So the two cells that respond the most effectively to a local-based cannabis treatment would be the mast cells in the skin, and then your lymphocytes, whether they're T or B lymphocytes. And so mast cells are, we talk about them mostly with, allergic reactions and with cancer, but mast cells play a huge role in the innate immune system for the fact that they release dozens of molecules that are both favorable and antagonistic to cellular health within the skin. And so, the mast cell population that exists there is extremely responsive, though, to cannabis-based therapies. And then more specifically, though, palmitoyl ethanolamide, which is a molecule we talked about before, they've done a lot of studies to show that PEA helps to really regulate and keep mast cells from being hyperactive in the allergic state. And so, again, this PEA molecule is really not talked about at all, but when we're talking about cannabis, it's definitely relevant for the fact that it's an analog of your endocannabinoids, which are already being produced. So we already talked about this, just kind of a little summary slide, but how do they combat or how do they neutralize inflammation? There's CB1 receptors and more densely CB2 receptors that are on pretty much every immune cell that's circulating throughout your body, and that's how they're playing and interacting with each other. So just hitting that point hard. More inflammation slides, but yeah. So again, cannabinoids can bind directly to the immune cells, and the way they work is they cause downstream cascade effects within the cell to reduce its hyperactive state, and then secondarily help to reduce local cytokine inflammation, and then a feeling of inflammation and pain, and then allodynia, and that's through the reduction as well as a reduction in ROS and RNS species production at that site. All right, so the research on the vet side is going to be a little bit behind, as we always kind of are when it comes to understanding the ways in which newer novel therapies work, or cannabis I wouldn't consider newer novel, but in terms of what we were allowed to finally do with it, it's unfortunately a little bit newer. But
new.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'm listening to it, like, how come we've only really been talking about this the last 10 years?
Yeah, since the 30s or 20s and 30s, the government has prevented us from using it therapeutically, and prior to that, they had AMA journals and articles, and then quickly between the 1890s and the 1920s, they destroyed anything that was botanical based and switched to petroleum-based pharmaceuticals for a variety of true and conspiracy theory ideas, and some of them are definitely true on one side, and we're never going to know probably. But people think there's a variety of opinions. I think that there's definitely a possibility that most, if not all, are true. But fortunately, I'm still called a conspiracy theorist a lot of times. So anyway, specifically though, in dermatitis, we do have a dog study, not in America, but came out of Italy or Spain, 1 and 2. Somewhere around there. A language I don't speak right now. Italy, right? Yeah, because it couldn't be Spain because I would speak that. So Italy. So, but basically, what this showed was that in the dog, that the cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2 receptors, of healthy dogs as compared to dogs with atopic dermatitis, that the study showed through biopsy tissues that CB1 and CB2 receptor immunoreactivity was detected in a higher amount in dogs that were found to have atopic dermatitis. And again, like I said, this is through tissue sampling, so electron microscopy, which showed that the body's upregulating these these receptors at that site, and are ready to respond if there's enough cannabinoids there, whether they're endogenous or exogenous. And then, lastly, let's make sure. Yep. So, and then lastly, obviously with the skin, we talk a lot about allergic disease, infectious disease, but, skin cancers and tumors, whether they're benign or malignant, and regardless of their etiology. We've had great success anecdotally at our farm here, at Angie's Rescue Farm here, as well as a lot of proof through people that have done prospective analysis that a cannabis-based therapy can be highly beneficial as either a mono or a multimodal therapy for addressing a variety of tumors that grow on the skin. The ones that are scary but the most fun to watch, honestly, are mast cell tumors, because of the fact that when you put an actual proven full spectrum product on that tumor, the body does an amazing thing, which I can only hypothesize, but it essentially looks like it localizes all the underlying inflammation, and it will get hugely red and swollen and inflamed locally, and then it will just completely explode, like within maybe like a week to 3 weeks, depending on how severe it is, and then it's gone. There's nothing there. So it's almost like the body is like purging itself of what's going on there, and it localizes it. It prevents it from happening. It doesn't, there's no pain or like, aggravation to the dog. I'm sure maybe it feels a little bit weird, but it's quite remarkable when you use this to address some of the diseases we see most common. And the other side, the benign side, with like skin tags or other sebaceous based tumors that grow that are benign, they all kind of follow this pattern, but the mast cells are the ones that are just really excessive, where you'll see them just engorge and explode, and then they just shrivel up and are gone. So it's quite interesting to watch. It's scary the first time you do it. You're taking these like pictures successfully, and you're like, this is getting really bad, and then all of a sudden it just explodes and it's done. So Angela has much more of the ability to have perspective information, since she treats so many of the animals that come to her rescue farm that are basically end-stage cases that people give up, and from immune-based cancers to blood cancers to more structured and localized cancers. Like she's been able to prove through action that the the ability to get a proper diet on board, and then proper supplementation where needed, with cannabis being obviously the one she focuses on most, it's pretty remarkably successful. And then in with that, cannabis can be enhanced in certain ways, and cannabis itself has over 200, less than 300 known terpenes or essential oils in it at various concentrations. But again, there's other ones that exist in earth that can also be extremely helpful depending on whatever you're trying to treat and use. And so cannabis, as a botanical and adaptogen, is able to work with a variety of other botanicals that we know and use very commonly. In addition, I don't know if anyone really uses bee-based therapies, but whether it's propolis or honey or nectar or what was the other one? The third one you can never use, or royal jelly. Some people use royal jelly. I haven't used that yet, but at least propolis and manuka honey I've used multiple times, and again, it works pretty interestingly for keeping that superorganism alive, and you can use it as long as you don't adulterate it there. But eucalyptus and ginger and vanilla, these are things that have been added to some of the products here for the fact that it really enhances the ability for cannabis to work well. And then, like I said, we have a couple of studies to help support this early proactive thought that this is something that should be used pretty much, I would say, in any practice whatsoever. But we have other studies that are showing that allergic or atopic dermatitis has the ability to be modified even in the face of corticosteroids, and actually may actually be more successful for the fact that if you look at what steroids are doing, they're just suppressing the immune system, and then you have to build them back up to that, whereas cannabis is a modulatory effect that's bringing you back to equilibrium and homeostasis. And then, I'm sorry, I didn't specifically state that these two studies involve this human drug, which is called adelmadrol, which is just PEA. So like I said before, PEA has the ability to not interact with CB1 and CB2 receptors specifically, but it's the other catalog of receptors that work in conjunction with the direct CB1, CB2 receptors. But again, this is another study which shows that this molecule itself has the ability to successfully downregulate mast cell degranulation, and then help to basically stabilize that immune cell population that exists there. And like I said, every cell that's there is supposed to be working in its proper way. That's why the body has created it, and that's why nature created it. But everything has the ability to be perturbed, and then so if we can use a treatment modality that doesn't suppress it and then have to build back up, if it can bring us back to homeostasis again, I feel like that makes more sense. So these are we're going to do just a couple of studies in humans, because like I said, we try to focus on the vet side, but the human side has more funding, larger populations, and larger control studies. So it's always good to kind of see what they're doing on that side as well, because they always are a little bit more advanced in terms of getting the ability to prove through studies. So this was a great paper that, if you wanted to start with, kind of understand how the endocannabinoid system exists in both health and disease, because again, like I said, it all comes back down to physiology as to why we're even considering cannabis. And again, they just showed that the endocannabinoid receptor distribution and density is different, but exists throughout the entire skin layer, whether you're talking about epidermis, dermis, or hypodermis. And it works in a variety of ways to make sure everything is trying to be as close to equilibrium as possible. And so whether you're dealing with at the epidermis at the basal level cell proliferation and differentiation, or at the free nerve endings where you're trying to reduce pain and the feeling of pruritus, or you're working at sweat glands and helping to prevent excessive sweating or seborrhea at the sebum glands. The endocannabinoid system is just hugely influential in the skin, and again, makes a lot of sense for us to be including it in multimodal therapy. Again, just supporting the idea that that cannabis-based therapy should be considered when we're treating a variety of different conditions involving the skin. Anything else specific on this one? Not really. This one kind of went into the other receptors as well, as the TRPV receptor class as well, which is talked about a lot more in the stomach and in the GI tract, involving cannabis-based therapies as well as in pain modulation. But this one kind of went and focused a lot on the immune-mediated and autoimmune conditions that we see a little bit more in humans, such as psoriasis, scleroderma, but also involved atopic dermatitis and skin cancer. So that's why I really like this paper as well. We already talked about that one. And then, anecdotal, but proof is in the pudding kind of thing. So just some really great stories of things that we've done on the farm that, Angie has been able to show through perspective nature what it can do to stuff. So, Daisy had a collection of mast cell tumors, correct, around her body?
Specifically one run, you talking about it?
Yeah, one
Yeah.
Attached to the spine on her back. And this isn't the first MCT that I got rid of, but it was because what happens on the other dogs is I think they could feel when it was about to explode, so they'd go out in the yard and roll around and come back, and I'd be like, where the hell did the tumor go? Because it literally would explode and they'd wipe it all off. She was 14 and it was back here, so she couldn't get it off. So it was disgusting, but extremely satisfying.
Yeah.
And she was
Yeah.
also
When it gets to that point where you have just oozing and gushing, it looks like basically like if you had one of the symptoms of an excessive mast cell degranulation, where you almost get that localized oozing and bruising, but you don't see the bruising. It's just a localized oozing from the site.
And of course, they're not feeling any pain because it's the full spectrum lymph extract that's right on there, so they're not feeling anything.
And actually, also using it internally, so we're attacking it from the bloodstream and also directly on the site, which we really recommend, especially when it comes to things like mast cell tumors. The salves will help a lot, but getting it right into their guns.
Which I did both. I would have dogs that I would just do just the salve, and then ones that I would do just the tincture, and then Daisy that I did the tincture and the salve, and I couldn't believe how quickly it happened.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful, and she lived another 2 years after this.
She looks pretty old now.
Yep. And she was a mess. Her owner passed, and the family didn't want her anymore, and but she lived another 2 years and ended up dying of dementia. So my new lesson is I'm paying so much attention to these geriatric dogs from getting cancer, beating cancer, keeping them from becoming lame, and then freaking dementia took them. So I'm not gonna let that happen again.
Yep.
So lion's mane for everyone now.
So this is another story. This is not from directly from the rescue farm. This is another dog, and
This is a customer client.
yeah, this looks like. First time I saw it, I was like, "Is this someone's ankle?" But there's a nipple, so it's definitely not an ankle. But as you can see here, this person had treated what looks to be a melanoma type tumor that within 10 to 14 days it had shrunken up, shriveled up, and fallen off, and was not even scarred or healing improperly, such as if you would have done localized radiation therapy on something like that, which would be potential if you did a excision and then radiation therapy. But again, it's just it's not like we're guaranteeing it's going to cure every single thing, but it miraculously has this ability to work in a variety of ways in some of the conditions that we would consider only have one option. And then what type of, this was like sebaceous kind of tumor that we saw that on Jolene, right? I'm sorry, the Jolene's was over here on the foot, and then, these are other ones that you've been able to treat
Jolene's
successfully.
mine, and this is another client. This client, the dog, 13 years old, and she said that the tumor was on the dog her entire life and refused to cut it off, and did the remedy. She did both too. Did the remedy, and it fell off in 2 weeks, and I didn't believe her. She showed us a picture every single day.
Yeah.
And it just crested and fell
Yeah.
off. And then Jolene, I just did the salve only, so it took a little longer on the papilloma between her toes.
Right.
to
So it's not
go
just
away,
it's not just tumors that are like growing and proliferating quickly. Even tumors that are what we would consider the cells are dormant for years. It has the ability somehow to activate that localized environment and then help to remove anything that's
And
not
then
supposed to be there.
Olivia, the one that fell off for 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is also our dog that we had such amazing results from Cushing's. The owner just calls and goes, "Is it possible it's helping her Cushing's?" And we're like, "I don't know." Absolutely, because it's a tumor on the pituitary or adrenal. So if it's going to shrink the tumor, then symptoms go away. So she was convinced that we had cured the dog of Cushing's because of it.
Yeah. So I mean, the list goes on and on. Like I said, those were tumors, but inflammatory-based disease, infections. It really is. It's a multimodal option that has zero reason legally not to be in a practice. Topically is, like I said, if you're worried about oral, I can promise you it's not a risk. But if you want to start somewhere where you can make a huge difference in pet lives, and then at the same time not have to give them pharmaceuticals right away unless you need it, and can really actually help their immune system remain robust, then these topical based therapies with cannabis in them, it's truly remarkable and 100% safe. I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. So and it's just so multimodal and so versatile that it just makes a lot of sense to start incorporating it.
Cool.
Yep. So that's really it.
Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions for anyone?